Few bill introductions today that I know of. We'll get a couple of them out of the way, maybe do our presentations, go back to it. First off, is there any bill introductions from the committee? Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. RS 2692, and that's going to be replacing 2240. It's similar to the SB 142, but it deals particularly if someone gets hit. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Any objections? Seeing none, the bill will be introduced. Are there further bill introductions from the committee? Senator Schallenberger.
Yeah. I'm looking at the revisers to see if they... I do have a bill that and I can probably find the number. Revisor number 2724 deals with trains. I'd like to have it introduced.
Committee, questions or objections? Seeing none, the bill will be introduced. Any further bill introductions from the committee? Seeing none, how about the audience? I know Adam Lusker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Lusker, Federico Durst Consulting. I have a bill to introduce regarding a distinctive license plate honoring Kansas's own professional sports team, the Sporting Kansas City soccer team, and it's RS number 2717.
Committee, any questions? Any objections? Bill will be introduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further bill introductions from the audience? Seeing none, we'll proceed on to our presentation. We have Joel Skelly here to introduce the new aviation director of KDOT.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Joel Skelly. Good to see you all again this morning. I have the privilege and honor to introduce to you today our new aviation director, Ray Seif. He is going to come up here in a minute and present to you a briefing on the airport needs inventory assessment that we did here this last year. We'll go through some of that at the request of the committee, kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up or a briefing on what we've learned and share a little bit about how we're going to move forward and working with our partners. But without further ado, and I did let Ray know that this is one of the best committees to come and talk to, so I don't doubt that you're going to completely live up to that accolade, but do appreciate the time to be in front of you today to provide a little bit of information about this assessment that we did. Thank you.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm about a week and a half in, so take it a little easy on me this time around.
You just state your name and position right off the bat for those online.
Ray Seif, Director of Aviation for KDOT. Also with me today is Caleb Coltrane with Garver, the consultant that produced the report that we're briefing today. With that, we'll get started. Kansas airport systems are very important to the state. There are 109 airports. 80 are classified as NIPIAS airports. They're on the FAA's National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, and they're eligible to receive grant funding from the FAA. 29 airports are non-NIPIAS or do not qualify to be on the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. Of these 109 airports, all of these 109 airports are the backbone of the transportation system within the state, and they support agriculture through allowing access to aerial applicators. They support air ambulance operations. They also support Kansas residents, businesses, educational institutions, law enforcement, and really have a huge support and impact throughout the state to the tune of $9 billion annually in economic impact. The Kansas Airport Improvement Program is a funding program that is administered through KDOT Aviation, and it's designed to assist airport sponsors in maintaining the state's public use airports. The primary purpose of the KAIP is to preserve and enhance or modernize the Kansas airport systems with the focus on a few key factors. One is maintaining the system's runways to very good condition, and we'll come back to that later on what that exactly means. Also minimizing surface travel time for air ambulance pickup locations, improving safety, and also enhancing airport and community economic development appeal. June of 23, KDOT Aviation initiated a statewide airport facilities inventory to supplement a recently completed pavement management plan. This report was to look at infrastructure throughout the state and determine the needs needed to meet KAIP program objectives. The joint task force was formed at that time, and the joint task force was made up of airport managers, airport consultants, engineers, the State Hospital Association, and various industry stakeholders, and they were in charge for looking at statewide guidelines for airport infrastructure. The joint task force had several key focuses that they were looking at. They reviewed pavement condition index and determined funding levels needed to meet KAIP program objectives. They also reviewed current and minimum infrastructure needs, including pavement, buildings, nav aids, navigational aids, and what would be needed to support airports in their roles throughout the system. And they evaluated the capability of the statewide airports to meet emergency management and air ambulance needs. A little bit more about pavement condition index. Once every 3 years, KDOT performs a visual inspection of all the 109 public use, open to the public airports. And we visually look at the pavement condition and assign a number from 0 to 100, with 100 being brand new pavement and 0 being don't walk on it, you'll break your ankle. So if we look at it, pavement around 65 to 100 is classified as very good. And that's a key indicator. So looking at going back to the runway pavement being maintained in a very good, well, very good is not very quantifiable. It's very subjective. So the Joint Task Force actually recommended selecting 65 as a critical pavement condition index, or PCI. Anything above 65 is easily maintained through just preventative maintenance. Anything below 65 requires additional resources to rehab or reconstruct. So looking at various pavements there, you can see very poor condition. Oh, my pointer's not. All right. So you can see very poor condition pavement. Prior to my position here, I actually managed an airport in Augusta, Kansas. Our pavement was rated at a 45. I had a Citation jet that landed, and they thought they had a flat tire because of how poor the pavement is. So there's a safety component to it, but that jet could have broken something that would have been extremely costly. It could have crashed on landing, and there's a safety aspect to pavements. There is very important. A little bit more on that pavement condition index. We can see here we're striving for that critical pavement condition index of 65, because anything above that is easily maintained, requires few resources relatively. If we let it get below 65, it'll cost way more exponentially to rehab or reconstruct. If we had all the money in the world, if funding was not an issue, we could strive for a higher pavement condition, but that is not feasible, unfortunately. So the 65 gives us a very good range that we can maintain, and gives us kind of a balance between funding levels and the pavement for safety. If we did absolutely nothing, our pavements would continue to deteriorate well beyond where they are right now. Right now, we are system-wide, and this is as of 2022, system-wide we have a pavement condition index of 62.8%. However, that's not the same for all airports, of course. You'll notice that NIPIAS airports, or airports that receive or are eligible to receive federal funds, are at 64.5%, where non-NIPIAS airports are much worse, at 48.7%. If we maintain the 65 critical PCI, or pavement condition index, right now, based on current funding levels, we would have a $33 million annual shortfall in funding. Another task that the JTF completed was looking specifically at the airport roles and how they fit within the airport system, and specifically in the interest of public safety in order to improve air ambulance access. They made some recommendations to some role changes for these listed airports. Basically looking at their runway infrastructure, their facilities, what they have, their resources. This is the current air ambulance coverage, so I'd like to draw your attention to the screen. The purple dots that you see signify a 30-minute drive to airports that already meet air ambulance requirements. So that's a 30-minute drive. You notice there's a lot of areas that are not covered within that. We look at the next screen with some of the modifications of the airports that mainly meet the requirements, but just may need some assistance with maybe a weather system or some minor changes. Changing those roles for those airports increases coverage. And if we look at the other recommendations with adding additional airports to or increasing the role of additional airports, we go to 91.7% coverage of the state's population. So we can see a dramatic shift between what we have right now and the role changes. The KAIP, or the Kansas Airport Improvement Program, is a state grant funding program. By statute, receives $5 million annually. In 2023, we had $11 million in awards. The Secretary can increase funding under the bipartisan Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Program, known as IKE. It is a variable state funding program with funding matches depending on the application type. All public NIPIAS and non-NIPIAS airports, or those airports that can receive federal funds and those that can't, are eligible for KAIP funds with the exception of the commercial service airports. The program is oversubscribed. This recent grant funding period, we haven't made any awards yet, but we had 135 applications, totaling $46 million in KDOT ask, with a total project value of $83 million, and we currently have $10 million in resources available. There are 4 different categories of KAIP projects. The first one is system preservation, the second one is modernization, third is equipment, and the fourth is design and planning. Each category has its own match requirements, and you can see those here. Now, there is a priority system that we have for selecting projects, so we don't just pick our favorites. There is a board that selects the projects based on a very specific priority system, based on safety, system preservation, how that project meets the Kansas Airport System Plan, and geographic remoteness, and there's some discretionary factors in there as well. In addition to KAIP funds, those federally eligible airports, the NIPIAS airports, can also receive FAA funds. Each eligible airport can receive up to $150,000 annually that goes towards eligible projects that are approved through the FAA. They don't get that money, it's reimbursement for eligible projects afterwards. So we can take a look at the discretionary funds, the entitlements, and supplemental funds over the last 10 years, and Kansas airports have received over $340 million within the last 10 years from the FAA, which averages about $34 million annually. Here is a basic plan of what a 10-year program might look like. We do have some budgeting shortfalls, and with anything that's supplemental or discretionary from the FAA, they're not guaranteed, so we can't forecast what we'll receive in the future. Those are received for those eligible airports on an as-needed basis based on their eligible projects and how those projects compete with other airports nationally. So you can definitely see there's a budget shortfall. Any increase to the statutory level of $5 million would dramatically help supporting KAIP objectives, and KDOT Aviation is committed to working with local, state, and federal partners to help find strategic funding opportunities to meet those needs. With that, that concludes the presentation. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee questions. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good presentation for your first time, so lots of information, but this is only my second session, so I have nothing really to compare it with. So you did great. I do have a few questions. And when you were saying very good, I'm from Manhattan, and we have our Manhattan Regional Airport, and we just did their runway. We updated that. But I think on page 3, slide 2, you have runway condition rating of, and in quotes, you have very good. What is the scale, and why is that, like, in quotes? Is that with your number system, or?
Very good is very subjective. So I can say that very good is 70 PCI, or pavement condition index, but someone else can come along and say very good is 85. So rather than saying that we'll maintain it to a very good scale, the committee, the Joint Task Force, recommended actually selecting a number, and that's that 65 pavement condition index that we chose.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to say I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Thank you. My next one is, if possible, when you have a minute, can you send a list of the airports in Kansas? I know you said there's 109, but I am only really familiar with 4 or 5, and I'd like to have a better understanding of what we have in the state of Kansas. For the matches, for the KDOT match for the fund, you just need a certain percent of match that needs to be met by the local airport entities. Is that meaning from their local communities, or did you mean also federal match? What kind of match are we looking for when you say 90-10 or 80-20? What is that match? Where are you looking for that match?
Typically, so for instance, going to the system preservation, it's a 90-10 split. 90 would be coming from KDOT, 10 would be from the local community, from their local budgets.
So not from FFA, but from their local budgets?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I appreciate your responses. I'm done, Mr.
Thank you. And this report will be published in the next couple of weeks. We're just getting the briefing ahead of time because we're getting ready to start on our budget. And that has the full airport assessment needs will be listed in that. Committee, further questions. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation today. Very informative. Johnson County has a Johnson County Executive Airport. Is that an NPIAS airport?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay. And how is the runway condition there rated, your page 3 index? Do you know?
So right off top, I don't. However, we do have a link that any airport and anyone actually can go in and see what the condition is. With the pavement management plan, we do have an online link that any airport can go in and see what each portion of their airport, what the condition is. So I'd be more than happy to share that link so you can see what the conditions are of all of the NIPIAS and non-NIPIAS airports within the state.
That would be great. If I have just a few more, Mr. Chair, if I may. At that airport, there's also an aviation school. How many flight schools do we have in Kansas, do you know? And is that something you oversee or help with at all in the DOT?
So I do not, unfortunately, have the number of flight schools. We don't necessarily oversee, but I hope to work with flight schools in the future. One of my dreams is to grow aviation and to have an aviation education program for the next generation. So we're not directly doing a ton, but I hope to change that in the future.
I'm glad to hear that. Aviation is a huge part of the economy in Kansas with our the industry in Wichita in particular. And part of airports is air traffic controllers. And does that mostly come through the federal government? And does KDOT have any role in that? And how many of our airports do have air traffic controllers sitting at them?
I don't have the information regarding the number of airports with air traffic control towers. KDOT doesn't oversee that. That is more of a federal role. However, with the aviation education and outreach, we hope to help build a pipeline that can include air traffic controllers. So it is a problem that we have nationally. We hope to address it in the future.
Good, I was hoping to hear that, because we do hear nationally about the incoming, air traffic controllers. Maybe there's not enough of them, and we certainly need those to keep our planes in the air and to keep them flying safely. So thank you for your presentation today, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you may have answered the question about where we can look for our own airports and their pavement criteria. You say there's a link, you're going to send a link.
Yes.
Then when you were talking about the report that we'll be seeing shortly, the chair did, will that have our airports listed with their pavement conditions in that report as well?
No, it won't, because that would be a huge add-on.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So I have a question about, if I may, one more, on the air ambulance piece of your presentation. When you say airports need to expand to meet minimum infrastructure requirements, are we talking length, width? What do you mean by expand?
So the first set of airports that I showed, they already met the runway requirements, and they may need additional facilities such as a weather reporting system, or may need just a few minor changes to help meet those requirements. The second one, where we were adding airports, those airports may need a little bit more assistance with pavement length or width, depending on which they're short, where they're short.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I think I only have one question. I suppose the federal government is the group who classifies these NPIASs, and is there a certain criteria that you have to be one?
There is, and the NIPIAS classification is based on the size of the airport, the number of aircraft based there, the number of operations, what their role is within the community, how close they are to other NIPIAS airports as well. Just from recent conversation with the FAA, they're going to be looking at reducing some NIPIAS airports in the future, several years. So several airports that maybe don't have the aircraft or operations or activity to support funding level being on the NIPIAS scale may become non-NIPIAS airports in the future.
Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a comment about the pilot schools. I know K-State Salina has a really good program, but I don't know how many graduates they have from there and how many stay in the state of Kansas. So I'm glad you're looking at expanding it, because certainly we would like to keep our pilots that are being trained in one of our airports in Kansas. Just a comment. Thank you.
Ray, I don't know if you're the one to speak to this, but could you speak a little on the asymptotic curve or parabolic curve when pavement condition starts getting bad and then it starts dropping off quickly?
Gotcha. So that's where we kind of have that 65 pavement condition index. Anything below 65 has an exponential increase in resources needed to rehab that pavement. So we can try to basically spend $1 to maintain that pavement all the way up to 65 by maybe doing seal coat or crack fill. But anytime we get beyond that, we're looking at about $4 to $5. So we're looking at a 400% to 500% increase in a quick time span below 65.
Thank you. I think there's a few of us on this committee that remember back about 10 or 12 years ago when our pavement conditions started getting that condition, and we were requesting that even they do some bonding to get the payment brought up so we didn't have to spend that extra money to rehab them. Air ambulance services are very important to our state as well as the businesses. Committee, any further questions? Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate your brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Committee notice contact information is on the back page of your handout. Oh, there's even a link to the needs assessment report. And we appreciate if you send that to the secretary so she can send that out to everybody on the list of individual airports. Committee, we have a full agenda today. Next up, we have Jill Shelley, Principal Analyst for KLRD, our very own, to give us a briefing on distracted driving, report on a new brief that came out.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Jill Shelley with Legislative Research Department, and I'm here to briefly walk you through the contents of a memorandum that we released on Monday regarding the costs of distracted driving and laws to reduce them in other states. The memo first provides information kind of summarizing some of the costs of distracted driving in Kansas and gives some federal estimates. Those costs can range approximately $2.2 billion a year just in Kansas, according to ks.gov estimates. The memorandum then describes facets of state laws regarding state distracted driving that are very broad in their scope. For example, using wording like no person shall engage in any activity not related to the actual operation of a vehicle in a way that interferes with safe operation. There's about 10 of those statutes, and the text of those is given in an appendix. The bulk of the memo covers prohibitions on the use of electronic devices while driving, which is prohibited to some extent in every state except Montana. They don't have any laws on the books on that. In 2021, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released a report on electronic device use bans, and that includes an appendix on model legislation. Among its recommendations are that the term use electronic device rather than communications device or a particular type of device, and to clearly state the behaviors that the law would prohibit. So given that, we decided to try to provide some context on the laws and help people look for the types of bans they're interested by using key words that we looked for in the statutes. We used any device or communications device, whether the statute used something like hands-free, voice-operated, whether it's mentioned holding the device, entering text specifically, and made any mention of video. Synopses of the wording in the statutes is provided in an appendix, but this does provide, the memorandum itself provides a list of which states have which types of wording in their statutes. The memo next addresses the exemptions that are currently present in Kansas law, listing the states that have similar exemptions. Some are very prevalent that we have in Kansas, such as an exemption for use by law enforcement and other emergency personnel. We found that in nearly every state's laws. And also another very common exemption is use in a vehicle stopped off the regular traveled portion of the highway, sorry. I would like to note that the states used stopped, they defined it in different ways. They might define it pulled off the traveled portion of the roadway and legally parked. They might define it as halted in traffic. They might define it where the traffic is stopped due to the lane being obstructed. They might even require the engine to be turned off. Right now, Kansas law allows use while reading, electing, or entering a number or name to make or receive a phone call. And we found that in the laws of only 7 other states. So the memorandum goes through the various types of exemptions in Kansas law and tells you which states have similar exemptions. Then there are the exemptions we found in other states' laws that are not present in Kansas law, One, a very popular one in other states has to do with licensed users of amateur radio. And then another thing was exempting certain types of employees, such as those of utility workers responding to an emergency. The next portion of the memorandum looks at fines and penalties. Kansas has a single fine of $60 for a violation, and it's among the minority of states that have a single fine amount or fine range. Most states increase fines for subsequent violations. We have an appendix that lists what we found in all the states with their fines, whether it was a singular fine, the range, what it went up to for each subsequent, how that, if it was present in the statute, what the classification of that violation was, like a traffic violation or a misdemeanor. Anyway, that's available in the memorandum. And the last bit of the memorandum covers device use by drivers of commercial vehicles. For most drivers, the prohibitions are in federal law for interstate commerce, and those are adopted in Kansas law via rules and regulations. The penalties for those are provided. So the memorandum looks really long, but most of it is appendices. So we provided each of the statutes that were reviewed for this and why we looked at them, like did they cover electronic device use? Were they for general ban on distracted driving? Or was it specific to penalties and enforcement, that type of thing? The next bit are the synopses that I mentioned, so that you can see each of, kind of what was in that law. Like, here's kind of a random one. For Virginia, in a law enacted in 2023, it's unlawful for any person while driving a moving motor vehicle to hold a handheld personal communications device. So that kind of gives you the gist of what they were attempting to prohibit with their statutes. Appendix D is the one specific to fines, penalties for distracted driving. So that's my brief synopsis of what is in the memorandum. It's on the KLRD website in 2 spots, on the main page right now and also under transportation. And Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. It looks like there was a lot of work, and it's a great resource for us. Committee questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all of this information. I think one of the biggest concerns is how is enforcement with all of it? Especially now with dashboards that have those big screens and people are trying to put in an address, trying to go somewhere. How do you enforce all of this when I think officers may be choosing, is this worth it? Or how do you enforce it so we're consistent? Because we don't want to reward bad behavior by not enforcing it, but we also want to make sure we don't have laws in the books that can't be enforced.
I am certainly no expert on law enforcement, and I would defer to those who are. I can tell you that it appears that these state statutes turned over in kind of waves, because one of the waves that sought to address that is the holding the device, that making that prima facie evidence of violation of the prohibition. Various legislatures have made different choices, so.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. I mean, that was probably not the right person to be asking me to ask you this question, but that would be my only question as we move forward with all, because I think they're very necessary. I just want to make sure we are also following what we put in the books, because distracted driving, especially now, is very extreme, and people are not as concerned as they need to be sometimes. So thank you.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jill, for the presentation today. You're here with us in committee every day, and it's nice to see you at the podium. You play a similar role in the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, so thank you for the big role you play in helping the legislature do its work. I do have 2 questions. One is regarding What does Kansas law say about if you are using your mobile phone, you've put in an address for your destination, and, you've got your phone there, it's talking to you, sometimes you can put the audio on, it tells you in 200 feet, turn left or whatnot, or, you'd be looking at it because it's your map of your direction where you're going. So is that prohibited in law to be listening and looking at your phone that's giving you directions to where you're going?
What is the prohibition, the exemption in current Kansas law in KSA 8:15,111 is receiving a message related to operation or navigation of the vehicle.
So that would not be prohibited to be using your phone to get directions and receive directions?
Not to receive them.
Not to receive them, but you wouldn't want to be putting in your address while you're driving. That would be prohibited.
It would be a very bad practice.
Right, because you're distracted. And to follow up on Senator Reddy's question, new cars these days are built with a screen in them about, the size of this piece of paper, some of them are. And I'm surprised to see that they are operational while the car is moving. You can put in the, pick your music or access your apps and things like that. And how is that handled in current statute in Kansas? I mean, it's one thing, obviously, for the passenger to be operating that device, but it would be something different for the driver. Is it prohibited? I assume it is for the driver to be operating the screen that's built into the vehicle while the vehicle's in motion?
Kansas law right now is specific to a telecommunications device. There are other state statutes who are specifically address video and prohibit all operation of devices unless it's a single finger or a swipe or voice operated. There are some that specifically prohibit watching a video of any kind except related to navigation and having that present.
Right, because the maps move. I mean, if you're watching your map, just where your vehicle is, and it moves. And thank you for clarifying. The assumption that I had was not what's currently in Kansas law. So it's just relating to a telecommunications device is prohibited from use from the driver while you're operating the vehicle. At present, okay, thank you.
Kansas law is among the few that have not been updated since 2010 that we found for this review.
Well, thank you for the review. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My microphone is on right now. I'd like to turn our attention to 142. Adam, could you give us a quick overview?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 142 would require that in the event that a motor vehicle is stopped with hazard warning lights, road flares, or caution signals, the driver of an approaching motor vehicle shall either change lanes if possible, or to proceed in the same lane with due caution and reduce speed. Violations would result in a fine of $75.
Committee, we just heard this a couple days ago. What's your pleasure on the bill? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember back when I was a rookie in 2021, you and I worked together on a similar bill to include utility vehicles in our move over law, and I thought that was really a great step. I view this as kind of the logical extension of that, so I'm very supportive of this. So I would move that the committee pass Senate Bill 142 out favorably.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Cluse. Question, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I will be supporting the legislation, I think it's a sad statement that we have to create a law in order to ask people to move over. I was on the Topeka Boulevard leaving the Capitol the other night, 3 emergency vehicles, and people were racing to get on past the stoplight. They couldn't pull over for a few blocks for those emergency vehicles. And I just kept thinking, what if it was your family that they were racing to? So it's a sad day that we need this legislation, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Bill is on the way to the floor, recommended favorably. Committee, thank you for your work. We will not be meeting tomorrow or Monday. Enjoy your time off. It's about to get busy. Yes, Senator Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm out of order. Sometimes I think maybe hoofing 3 flights of steps might be quicker than our elevator someday, but I do have a bill introduction. Would you allow that, or would you like me to wait until Tuesday?
We'll take a bill introduction.
Okay. We always say nothing is ever simple. As your car dealer on the committee, I'd like us to look at changing a reporting date to be the same there's 2 different dates. It's not in rules or regs, it's in statutory. So we'll have one single date for our monthly reports to be sent in.
You have the RS number?
I do, and I'm so sorry, 2297, Florence.
Committee, any questions? Any objections? Bill will be introduced and we are adjourned.
Thank you.